Hello and welcome to week 4 of the School English from Coventry City Council. This is the week on punctuation. It's nice to see you. I hope you're well. Let's make a start. So as ever, here's my email address should you have any questions or feedback, and the links in case you're interested in any other courses that we offer at Coventry Council. Just the usual basics, telephone number, sessions approximately 45 minutes. You can obviously pause wherever you want to, and just to remind you that we have duty of care to yourselves. We promote safeguarding, prevent, and the British values, which are also encouraged through your children's schools. So week 4, punctuation. How are you feeling about your spelling now? Did you manage to have a practice with any of those activities or games last week? Hoping you're feeling a bit more confident as we plough into punctuation this week. Okay, so this week we're going to be looking at types of punctuation, where and how they're used, when they're taught, and how they are taught. Okay, it's quite a bit to this week. Punctuation being quite a large topic. Where do you put yourself already? Do you feel red? Is it completely new to you? Do you not even know what punctuation is? Perhaps you're yellow or orange, you know, a bit or most of it, or perhaps you're really confident. Perhaps this is an area that you're absolutely happy with. Let's hope so. So just to bear in mind those task images, okay? So if you see the thought bubble, please just stop and think. Again, pause if you need longer to do so. And the same with the writing down, notes for yourself, help with your own understanding and learning. Please feel free to pause if you need to take longer. So let's get started then. What is punctuation? So a picture at the top, that gives you a bit of a clue as to most of the types. It includes capitals, commas, question marks, exclamation marks, speech marks, colons, brackets, and full stops. Okay, quite a few commas in an example there for you to see. Why do we need it? Why do we need punctuation? Why does it matter? Let's have a look at a quick clip to give us some ideas.
Punctuations is all part of the structure of the sentence, isn't it? It actually puts pauses into it with commas. It actually shows where letters have been abbreviated with apostrophes.
Inverted commas if speech marks if you're writing something and somebody's talking in the middle of what you're writing.
When you're reading the documents, it tells you when to breathe and when the gaps are. You can actually try to pick out what they're trying to get across to you.
Full stops, capital letters, it's all about emphasising the beginning and the end and emphasising the structure of the sentence.
Here's an example of an exclamation mark we're using our signage. It's put there as it's a quote from a lyric, and it's there to emphasise the fact the lyric is shouted.
Okay, so that's just some examples of where we see punctuation out and about. Why do we need it? And it is all about timing, emphasizing start and ends, how we say things, their meaning. Okay, and if you remember, when you're reading something, it's very different to when you hear it. When you hear somebody speak, there are lots of clues about if it's a question. Quite often their tone will go up at the end. So what's the matter with you? It's almost sing-songy. Whereas when you read a question, what's the matter with you? You need clues in there because you're reading it in your head, or if you read it aloud, it's your interpretation. And the punctuation helps with that. It helps us to pause in the right place. It helps us to put emphasis in the right place. It helps us to understand when somebody is speaking and the type of sentences as well. Let's have a look some more. So capital letters are punctuation in themselves. Okay, if you look at the first line, the lowercase letters are the letters that we use in the middle of words normally. Okay, in the middle of sentences. Capital letters on the bottom line, also known as uppercase. When do we use them? Let's have a look. Every sentence starts with a capital letter. There should always be a capital letter after a full stop, question mark, or exclamation mark. For instance, look at this example. Nick went to the shops, full stop. He came back with a bag of fruit, full stop. Next sentence begins with a capital D. Did he go? Question mark. Capital H, he did, full stop. Capital H, he went, exclamation mark. Okay. A capital letter also should be used for the first I and for the names of people and places. For instance, days, months, titles of films and TV shows and songs, and people's names such as Anne, York, France, Sunday, November. Initials also need capital letters. For example, BBC. BBC, the TV channel, also actually stands for the British Broadcasting Corporation. You've got the 3 letters there. UK, standing for the United Kingdom. RAF, the Royal Air Force. And DIY, do it yourself. They're initials. Each one needs a capital letter. Let's have a look at some common mistakes. I on its own is always a capital I, or I with the line at the top and the bottom. Always. So here we have, I have 2 children. She's my sister and I am her sister. They always need to be a capital I. There's no exceptions to that. They always do. Okay. And another one just to note here is a lowercase p, the p. It doesn't stand on the line. It sits under the line, unlike the capital. And that's one to note. So let's have a look at punctuation on the national curriculum. So this is the national curriculum statement, which gives when a topic should be introduced. Okay, so this is when it should first be shown. So if we go down, and in year 1, we're separating words with spaces, sometimes known as finger spaces, introducing capital letters, full stops, question marks, and exclamation marks to demarcate sentences to end of sentences, and capital letters for names and for the personal pronoun I. So in year 1, that's introduced. In year 2, we continue with the use this time. So instead of introducing them, now they're using them. Capital letters, full stops, question marks, exclamation marks. Commas to separate items in a list, and apostrophes, to mark where letters are missing when spelling and using possession in nouns. In year 3, we introduced inverted commas to punctuate direct speech. The speech marks. In year 4, they actually use these inverted commas and punctuation for direct speech. They start to use apostrophes to mark plural possession and the use of commas after fronted adverbials. In year 5, we have brackets, dashes and commas to indicate parenthesis, which is where we give extra information, and the use of commas to clarify meaning or avoid ambiguity. And in year 6, we introduce and use a semicolon, colon and dash. Use the colon to introduce a list and semicolons within lists. And we look at punctuation for bullet points and how hyphens can be used to avoid ambiguity. Quite a bit there. Obviously, the children are learning it within other topics, such as their grammar and the spelling and the reading and the writing. And it's introduced bit by bit. And they're shown, they do a lot of activities to build it up, but this is where it's supposed to be introduced. Okay. Some of these things I don't actually remember being introduced to in primary school at all. Some of them, certainly for me, were a secondary school thing, or perhaps not even really in my memory clearly outlined to me at all. But they're important, and they will help your children to be competent writers. So let's start with the full stop. It marks the end of a sentence. So for instance, here we've got, I will go to the zoo, full stop. But what's a sentence? So a sentence is a group of words which expresses a complete thought or idea. Okay, it's got to be a complete idea to work. Generally, it has a subject and a verb, and it's based around one idea. The verb being a doing or a being word, to play, to sit. The subject being the thing the sentence is about. Okay, let's look at some short sentences. Birds fly. Jesus wept. The dollies. Okay, each of those are sentences. They're very short sentences, but they are sentences. We've got our verb, The first one is to fly, and our subject the birds. Our verb to weep, our subject Jesus. Our verb is, the doll is, exists, our subject the doll. Okay. Let's look at these ones together then. Are these sentences? Have a think. Sam sat on the. Is that a complete idea? We've got Sam as our subject. His verb is sitting. But does it complete the idea? It doesn't, does it? We don't know what Sam sits on. Next one. The cat and the fish. Is that a complete sentence? The dog ran up the hill. The doll is in the cot. Can you find the verb? Can you find the subject? Jumps on the bed. Sam is a dog. What do you think? Pause if you need a moment more. Let's have a look together. Sam sat on the. It's not a sentence. It isn't complete, is it? It's not a complete idea. The cat and the fish. It's more of a list than a sentence. It doesn't actually tell us what they're doing. It just lists two things. The dog ran up the hill. Yeah, the hill. Dog ran. So we've got our subject, the dog, and what he's doing is to run. Okay. The doll is in the cot. The doll is our subject. To be is what she's doing. That's a verb. Jumps on the bed. We're missing a subject there, aren't we? We know what happens. There's jumping, but we don't know who or what's doing it. The last one, Sam is a dog. Sam being the subject is what he's doing. Okay. Sentences can be extended with connectives or conjunctions, such as these ones, okay? We've got connectives for adding, sequencing, emphasising, comparing, cause and effect, qualifying, illustrating and contrasting. Children move through these. We start with the ones for adding and sequencing. They're quite simple. And, also, next, then, before. We build on those as we move through the years. So, for instance, Ray went to the park. He was bored. Using a connective, we can join them. So we're going to use and, a simple one to start with. Ray went to the park and he was bored. Okay, we've taken the full stop out, we've replaced it with and so the second capital letter for he can be changed to a lowercase because it's not a new sentence anymore. Ray went to the park and he was bored. Another one we could use. Ray went to the park because he was bored. Okay, they're both conjunctions, they both connect these sentences together. They both work, they both make sense when you read them back. But interestingly, they change the meaning, don't they? Ray went to the park and he was bored suggests that he's bored at the park. Perhaps there's no one to play with. Perhaps the swings are not working. Ray went to the park because he was bored suggests that Ray went to the park after being bored, yeah, rather than was bored at the park. So choose carefully, can have an impact on meaning, okay? Other uses for a full stop. There's one we don't really see so much anymore, but following initials. So John F. Kennedy would have had a full stop. Maybe not so much now. Following abbreviations. So for Mrs. with a dot at the end, Thatcher. Potentially don't see these as much as we used to. Some people still use them. It's less common, particularly after the Mr. or the Mrs. Okay, let's look at question marks then. Question marks come at the end of a question. Here's a simple one. Why are you late? And we mark it being a question with a question mark. That helps the reader when they're reading a piece of text, because actually we know it's a question. Just by looking at it before you get to the end and we spot the question mark, we know it's a question. Okay, it changes the tone of our voice. It changes the way we say it. Why are you late? As an instruction is different to why are you late? It changes our facial expression. It changes the tone we use. You can't hear that when you're reading, so we use this to help us. A comma written on just under the line, okay? Commonly used to separate 3 or more single items on a list. If you've only got 2, you just have and. So if you're going to say, I went to the shop and bought sausages and fish, you wouldn't need a comma. I went to the shop and bought sausages, bread and fish. You'd have a comma between your sausages and bread, okay? Here's another example. They ate pears, comma, apples, comma, plums, comma, grapes, and peaches. Another example. For Christmas, I'd like a new car, comma, a champagne dinner, comma, a luxury holiday, comma, a kitchen extension, and a lion. Okay, this is a nice game that we sent out to you with the resources. You literally cut the cards up so you can use your pictures and you can use your punctuation and you can use your words. And it's literally, there's a verbal game like this. I went to the shops and I bought pears. You can match your picture of your pears with your word. And the next person might say, I went to the shop and I bought pears and milk. Okay, so then you put, I went to the shop as your sentence and bought pears and milk. The next person would repeat what you've said and add their own. I went to the shop and I bought pears, milk, and tea. So now you'd have to take your and out, put your comma in, put your and in after. Okay, nice game. Resources are there for you to print and cut out. There are also some instructions within the resources. Other uses for a comma. Like many things in the English language, it's not as straightforward as there just being one rule. There are other reasons that we use them. So a slight pause in a sentence when we join two clauses to make one sentence, okay? So even though I love donuts, my sister hates them. We've joined two sentences. I love donuts, my sister hates them. To separate different parts of a sentence, and we call that parenthesis or an embedded clause, okay? The teacher, who was called Miss Brown, smiled proudly, okay? We could take out who was called Miss Brown. The teacher smiled proudly. It still makes sense, okay? The parenthesis, this bit in the middle, who was called Miss Brown, it gives us more detail, but it isn't necessary to make sense in the sentence, okay? It adds more detail to the sentence. An exclamation mark can be used after something is shouted. Help! Again, for when you're reading. If you're reading from a play script, it tells you how to say it. If you're reading in a book, it tells you what's going on. It gives you a bit more about the atmosphere. You know, it's a bit different me saying help, pass the screwdriver, and help! There's a wolf coming. Yeah. Again, for intonation, can be used after an order is given. Come here. It's very different to come here, please. Okay, gives us intonation, gives us more about the atmosphere and what's going on. Used after a strong feeling is expressed. The boy was furious, really underlying. She was so scared, really underlying how they're feeling. And can be used after humour or surprise. The teacher wore her slippers to school by mistake. Okay, we're exclaiming in each of these sentences, but for different reasons. But again, it gives the reader a bit more information about how we're saying what's being said, okay? To help us to understand it a bit better in our head, to help us to know how to take it and what was intended by the writer. And if we're reading aloud, it helps us to use our tone of voice to really get into what's on the page. Okay, let's look at some differences between these three then. A statement tells you something, it ends with a full stop. A question asks you something, it ends with a question mark. And always read it back. If you're not sure if it's a question or not, read it back and check. A command tells you to do something. It can end up with the full stop. Sometimes it ends with an exclamation mark. Okay. An exclamation shows surprise, a cry or strong feeling about something. It ends with an exclamation mark. We've seen a full stop there, aren't we? An exclamation often starts with the words how or what, and they come onto this more in year 2. This is a nice game, peg game, and the idea is you just get some ordinary pegs and you can draw different punctuation on the bottom of them on the bit that you clip. So you could have a full stop, you could have a question mark, you could have an exclamation mark, and you print this sheet out and you decide where it needs to go. So you cut them into strips. The resources that come, you've got more on. And if you look at the gaps between each word are quite big, so you can fit a peg in. So the first one, is your name Fred? So you could change your punctuation. So you could put a full stop on the end of it. Is your name Fred? Do you think that's correct? Is your name Fred? Read it back. It's a question, so take the full stop off, put a question mark on. It's good for doing lists as well. It's good for putting your commas in, and it's good for practicing. Quite often with children, when they start writing with punctuation, they get a bit concerned about getting it right or wrong and rubbing it out or crossing it out and how to do it nicely. This is a really nice example of getting them to practice. And once they're happy with it, they could write it out. So it's a really good physical way of getting them to practice. Okay, so ellipses, the duh, duh, duh moment. Okay, so ellipses, these 3 dots, are used sometimes to build suspense or make the reader wonder what is going to happen next. We saw that, if you remember, in the poem that we looked at with the skeleton in the school reading. Slowly creeping around the corner, there came a mysterious shadow. And we'll leave that pause, and it's kind of to build up suspense and to kind of make us wonder what's coming next. Yeah, to really hook the reader in, or to show a trailing off of action or thoughts. And again, we saw this in the poem that we looked at about the skeleton. Harry became sleepier and sleepier. His head fell forward, his eyes closed. You kind of get the impression of him nodding off in that one, yeah. Okay, VCOP, vocabulary connectives, openers, punctuation, quite often taught to children in schools. And there's a lovely idea called Kung Fu punctuation, which may take place in some of your children's schools. And the idea is that instead of just teaching to the children, sometimes use a full stop, put one there, here's a worksheet, we actually get them physical. And there's different signs for each method of punctuation. You've got your full stop, you've got your question mark, your exclamation mark, etc. And this is a real simple way of getting the children. Not all children are learners who like to sit down and be told how to do it. Some children really need the kinesthetic. They need to get up and do it in order to understand it, and it sticks in their head better. And actually, if they can do it with their hands when they come to write down, they can remember that. And it's really good fun as well, which is good. It gets children off their bottoms, it gets them up and acting it out, it gets them able to carry that back with them when they're carrying on with their work. Let's have a look at this one. I've lost it. So just a really nice example. Obviously, they've got dressed up particularly to perform for us, and they've clearly practiced, but just a really nice example of how, by taking let's sit down and remember all these terms and not forget what's what and why we use it, actually they take it into the very physical and literal, and you've got them, you know, you could see her using her hands to describe things, so it's quite clear, and her voice as well. When it was a question, or when something was an exclamation, or when she was building up tension. And the idea is that the children have got these options, and what are they going to use and how are they going to use it. And again, they had their she and their have, the different things, and it just really helped to fit in with some of the learning styles there as well. And if they can see it and they can think it and they can remember it, that will really help when they're sitting down, as opposed to just can't remember which is which. Opening it up and having a bit more action and excitement to it. As it works with younger children, it works here too, and that's worth remembering. Might be worth finding out from your children's school if they use any of that. Right then, that might be a really good place for a break actually. If you want to take a break, please just pause, come back to me in a few minutes, and then we'll carry on. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. Let's have a look now at the apostrophe. So, an apostrophe is used to show that letters have been missed out by omission or a contraction. Okay, so for instance, here we've got I don't know what happened, and here we've got ordinarily don't know. We take don't. Don't is a contraction of the words do not. We start off with do not. We push it together, we take out the O, and the apostrophe is in place of that O to show it's missing. Okay. Also, we use apostrophes to show the ownership, to show possession. Okay, so Jane's hat. We look at that one, Jane's hat. It belongs to Jane, and therefore we use apostrophe S to show that. Okay, it's Jane's hat belonging to Jane. Okay, why do we need apostrophes then? To show that we've missed letters out. Surely we can just know. Let's have a look at this. Here's the first one. Look, he'll. Okay, short for he will. And how. If we don't put the apostrophe in, we get how instead of he'll. Quite different meanings. Let's have a look. He'll run fast. Hell is very hot. Okay, they've got very different meaning. Without the apostrophes, it's very easy, or with missing apostrophes or apostrophes in a different place, it's very easy to misread the word. Okay, there are a lot of words that kind of cross over into others and give us a completely different meaning. It can confuse us when we're reading. It can give us a completely different understanding of what we're reading, and it can just switch us off as well. Let's have a look at this one. We've got she'd, short for she had, she would, and shed. Again, without the apostrophe, she'd become shed. She'd stayed up too late. The shed was full of pots. Two very different sentences, yeah? Shed stayed up too late. That doesn't make sense. The she'd was full of pots. Is she full of pots? Yeah. Again, this is why we need it. This is why we use it. It makes sense. It helps us as readers to understand and not make mistakes. If we don't understand what we've read, we may as well have not read it in the first place. We get misinformation. We get confused. We don't want children to get confused in what they're reading themselves or what they're writing for other people to read. We want them to be effective readers and writers, effective communicators. It will help them in all areas. So let's have a look at some together and see if we think they're right or wrong. So we're thinking about letters for omission, as in I am, going to I'm, we take the I out with the apostrophe, and ownership, possession, for instance, Abdul's hat. So let's have a look then. Let's look at these two in the top box. Purple one, I can see lots of people with an apostrophe. The red one, I can see lots of people without an apostrophe. Which one do you think is correct? It's the red one, okay? There's no omission, lots, and it doesn't belong to anybody. So we don't need an apostrophe in that one. Let's have a look at the one in the green box. David's book was in his bag in green. David's book was in his bag in yellow. Which one do you think is correct? Which colour? This time it's yellow, okay, because the book belongs to David. There's ownership there. David's book, it belongs to David. So we need an apostrophe to show ownership. David's book was in his bag. Next one, we've got in the blue box, bananas for sale in yellow or bananas for sale in blue. Which one do you think is correct? This time it's the blue one. Okay, it's a plural. It just means more than one banana. Okay, it doesn't say who they belong to. It's not an ownership. It's not an omission. We've not taken any letters out. So the blue one's correct there. Let's look in the green box this time. Kate's bananas are for sale in green or Kate's bananas are for sale in purple. Which one do you think is correct? This time it's the purple one, okay, because these bananas belong to Kate. They're Kate's bananas, okay? And the apostrophe shows ownership here. They're Kate's bananas. Blue box then, we've got 3 to choose from this time. You're going to be in trouble in red. You're going to be in trouble in green. And you're going to be in trouble in blue. We've got to think about our homophones and our homographs here, because actually they all sound the same. But again, it's not about how they sound, it's about how we write them. Which one do you think is correct? Okay, it's the green one in this occasion, okay? Remember, it's a contraction. Your, Y-O-U apostrophe R-E, is a contraction for you are. We take out the A from you are, push it together and put the apostrophe because it's missing. So whenever you're writing using your, check. When you read it back, is it actually short for you are, or is it your as in belonging to you? You're going to be in trouble. You are going to be in trouble. That makes sense. And if we're doing that, we must put the apostrophe in for the reasons we just looked at with heal and hell and she'd and shed. We need the apostrophe in there, otherwise it completely messes it up. So the green one's correct this time. In the green box, hot pies and drinks available in yellow or hot pies and drinks available in purple. Which one's correct? It's the purple one this time, okay? They're plurals again. They don't belong to anybody that we know of in this sentence, okay? Obviously somebody owns the pies, but this sentence isn't telling us about this. This isn't about somebody's ownership, and there isn't a contraction. We haven't made anything, we haven't taken any letters out. There's no omission, okay? Blue box then, it's been a long, hard day in blue, or it's been a long, hard day in yellow. Which one do you think is correct? Okay, it's the yellow one. Okay, it's been short for it has. It has been a long, hard day. So we've taken some letters out, haven't we? We've taken the H and the A out of it has. So we need the yellow there. Don't ask me, I don't know, using those exclamation marks. Yeah, don't ask me, I don't know. Green or red, which one do you think is correct? Do we need the apostrophes in this one? Yep, we do. It's the red one. Short for do not. A letter is missing, so don't. We've omitted a letter. We need the apostrophes in there. Okay, so the red one's correct. It's our last one. So in the blue box, you're my best friend in green or you're my best friend in blue. Now, come on, you guys. We've just done a you're. Which one do you think it is? Have a look at it. Is it short for you are? Yes, it is. So which one's it going to be? It's the blue one with the apostrophe, yeah, because it's short for you are my best friend. Read it back if it works. You know, it's a real quick thing you can do in your head. Nobody needs to know you're doing it, but use that, okay? And the last one, well, the picture's a bit of a clue, I guess. That's all, folks, or that's all, folks. And some cartoons going back certainly to my childhood. Which one do we need? The purple one's correct. Yeah, that's is short for that is. That's all, folks. We've taken an I out of is. It's a contraction. We need to put the apostrophe in. Okay. Is it really all that important? We've looked at all of those examples. Some of them you might well be thinking, you know, it's blowing my mind. I don't understand. There's so many rules, but is it all that important? Do you think it's important? Some people would say it doesn't matter. When we speak, we don't put apostrophes and speech marks and things in, do we? But we lose those clues when we're looking at paper and we're reading things. We lose those clues. Does it matter if when you write a letter it looks correct and it reads correctly? Well, think about application forms and things. It is quite important that you put across that you can communicate effectively, isn't it? It doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. Let's have a look at this one. Let's eat, Grandpa, or let's eat, Grandpa. So let's have a think about this one. Two meanings here. Could be quite dangerous for Grandpa. Are we eating Grandpa for dinner? Let's eat Grandpa. Or are we eating with Grandpa? Let's eat Grandpa. Do you see the point? Without the comma in there, the suggestion is that we're eating Grandpa. If you were given an instruction or an order on a piece of paper in this way, let's eat Grandpa. Grandpa could be eaten before you get a chance to take it back. And it's joking, it's fun, but just, you know, it is important. The difference is in the meaning, okay? Let's eat Grandpa for dinner, or let's eat Grandpa. Let's eat dinner with Grandpa. You know, a simple piece of punctuation can make that much difference to meaning, which is quite funny really, isn't it? But it really can. Let's have a look at this one. Read it carefully. Does it seem a little rude? Have a little look at that one. The arrow is pointed to something quite important there. Let me read it with you. Thank you. Your donation just helped someone get a job. Do we need that full stop there? Should it read your donation just help someone get a job? I think it should, but it sounds like it's giving you a direction to get a job, doesn't it? Quite interesting. And capital letters all over the place in that one as well. Whether they're necessary or not is another story, but okay, can you just see? And sometimes it's really more important than others. Sometimes it doesn't make that much difference and you can work out it's an error, but actually if you're not that confident with it, it can make a big difference. So it is important we get it as correct as possible and we teach it correctly to children, okay, so that for the most part they're understood and understandable to others. Speech marks and inverted commas is the other thing they're known as. They're placed around what is actually said, again when we're writing. So look at the bit in red. Let's read the sentence. Jack's mum said, speech mark, see how much money you can get if you take the cow to market. Okay, so it's only around the bit that's said, not the bit that explains to us how we say it or who said it. Okay, I'm off to market, explained Jack, to sell my cow. Okay. So we don't, the bit in black is just giving us some ideas. The old man asked Jack, so we know who's talking to who, but what's actually said is, would you swap your cow for a handful of magic beans? So that's the bit that's in the speech marks, okay? Only the bits in between the speech marks are the bits that are said out loud, okay? Let's have a go at adding speech marks to the sheet, suggested Kate. Okay, so let's have a look together then. Let's look at this together first. Knock, knock. Who's there? Canoe. Canoe who? Can you do my homework for me? Terrible joke. Let's have a look at how we could sort this out. So let's do it into speech marks. Knock, knock. Who's there? Canoe. Canoe who? Can you do my homework for me? Right, so now we've got an idea that this might be a conversation. Might be two people talking to each other. Okay? Now we've clearly pointed that out by putting them in different colours into speech marks. Let's take those speech marks and write it out in sentences following those colours. So knock, knock, canoe, canoe do my homework for me is all said by the purple person, who's there, and canoe who is by the red. Okay. So let's give those people names. The purple person's now going to be called Fred and the red person's going to be called Mel. Okay. So we're carrying on that colour coding just to help out. Okay. This is a really, really early way of explaining this to children. Fred said, knock, knock. That's what's in the speech marks. Mel answered, who's there? Fred replied, canoe. Mel queried, canoe who? And again, helps us with when we're speaking it to know the speech marks there, but we've also got a question mark, so we know we might be saying that slightly differently. Fred cheekily asked, can you do my homework for me? He's being cheeky, he's being cute. It helps us with thinking about how we might say it, okay? The speaker first is the easiest to learn. So by that, what we mean is Fred said, Fred asked, Mel wanted to know, Sarah thought. Speaker first is the easiest to learn simply because of the rest of the punctuation of the sentence. Once we've taught that and they're confident in that, we have a go at putting the speaker at the end next. Have a look at this. Knock, knock, said Fred. Who's there? Questioned Mel. Canoe, replied Fred. Canoe who? Queried Mel. Okay, so we teach the speaker at the end next. It's a nice activity for you to have a go with at home, and you can either pause and have a go at this now or have a go with your child a bit later on, doing the same thing but with this one. Knock, knock, who's there? Ivor, Ivor who? Ivor saw a hand from knocking. Same again, you'd put it into two coloured speech bubbles, then you'd have your two different coloured lines, then you'd have a go at putting your speech marks around it as well. Okay, depending on where your child's at. If they're not onto this yet, save it for another time. If they are, have a go. If you want to email to me what you've had a go with, that'd be lovely. I'd quite like to see what you've done. Next one then, the colon. Used to introduce a list. For instance, we will need paper, pens, pencils and rulers. Used to follow a statement before an example is given. For instance, there are several climatic regions of Earth, deserts, rainforests, polar regions, etc. Used before dialogue in a play script. So Jenny, then we get what she says. Hi Clive. So we've got the person who's saying it and they're saying. That's a colon. Okay, three reasons that we use a colon. The semicolon. Dot with a dash underneath, bit of a comma. Semicolons is used to separate two main clauses in a sentence. It's longer than a comma, the pauses, but shorter than a full stop. It could be two sentences or a semicolon. Okay, so I like the book, full stop, it was a pleasure to read. You could replace that with a semicolon. I like the book, it was a pleasure to read. Not as short as a comma, slightly longer pause, but not quite as long as a full stop. Okay, we don't see as many of these anymore as we used to, but they can be used. They're also used to separate more complicated lists. For instance, I took 2 books, 4 or 5 pencils, 3 pens and a ruler. It's not a book, a ruler, a pencil. It's more complicated, so they can be used for that purpose too. Let's try these ones. The rabbit had been sadly neglected. It was in an awful state. How about we put a semicolon in? The rabbit had been sadly neglected. It was in an awful state. Yeah, put a semicolon in. It's not a new sentence anymore afterwards, so we don't need the capital letter. We take the full stop out there and it goes at the end. Number 2, John opened the drawer. It was empty. Same again with a semicolon. John opened the drawer, full stop out, semicolon in. It was empty. Full stop at the end. That work? Read it back. Number 3, the yellow one. Number 3, the wedding invitations have all been sent out. 200 guests are expected. And put a semicolon in there. The wedding invitations have all been sent out. 200 guests are expected. Either works. And as I say, we don't see semicolons so much anymore, but hopefully you can see it's linking 2 sentences that don't necessarily need a full stop between them. Sally's birthday is in November. John's is in September. Sally's birthday is in November. John's is in September. Okay, linking them together. Brackets for parenthesis. Brackets are used to surround a word or phrase to separate it from the rest of the sentence. For instance, the jolly chef, singing loudly, cooked the spaghetti. And quite often when we read it with brackets, we do almost say it in an aside way. The jolly chef, singing loudly, cooked the spaghetti. Okay, we don't say the jolly chef singing loudly cooked the spaghetti. We say it as though it's separate. It's got a slightly different tone. Jamaica, population 2.7 million, is an island in the Caribbean. Okay, and just looking at those, if we took those brackets out and what's in them out, would the sentences still work? The jolly chef cooked the spaghetti. It would. Jamaica is an island in the Caribbean. It would work without them. That's interesting to note. Okay, a dash or a hyphen can be known as either. A single dash is followed by an afterthought or conclusion to a sentence. So for instance, it was a great day out. Everybody enjoyed it. The sentence works on its own. It was a great day out. This is still part of the sentence. It's an afterthought. It concludes the sentence. Sometimes it can be used to join 2 separate words together to form a new expression. So for instance, box office, house trained, easygoing. Okay, there is a lot there because we've gone through quite a few different types of punctuation. Obviously, these aren't taught to the children all at once. This is taught in a more gradual process, as you can see, and look back at the National Curriculum Grid. That's also sent as a resource, but obviously you can rewind this as well. It's taught gradually, but these are the rules that your children will be working towards, okay? Which ones do you think are most tricky? If you've got slightly older children already who are maybe dealing with some of these, are there any that they particularly struggle with? Hopefully you've got some more ideas for those. If you've got any particular questions or anything that you'd like to know a bit more about, please do email me. I'm happy to have a go at sending more resources or point you in the right direction if I can. Here are some good websites for some online activities to do with punctuation. If you follow those links, they take you to the punctuation pages. Definitely worth a look. for some more activities. So this week we've covered quite a bit. We've looked at all these types of punctuation, where and how they're used, what's taught to each year group, and some of the ways in which they're taught. Okay, there's a definition sheet that will come out as well, and resources that will just help you so that you can refer to. We've got some activities and websites on there as well. Okay, there is a lot to this week. I would suggest that you stop and you look at it and you dip in and out according to what children are learning about. But we've covered the basic rules, which hopefully will help with what they're doing. So just take a moment to reflect. Where would you put yourself now with punctuation? Do you fully understand it? Are you green? Are you a bit yellow or orange? Do you understand most or some of the topic? Or are you really not still confident? Would you like more help? Again, please do feedback to myself. If you'd like to share how today might have been helpful, anything you'd like more help with, again, drop me an email if you'd like to, and I will be more than happy to help. And next week, once you've caught your breath after this week, we're going to look at grammar in schools. Okay, quite a big topic again, but certainly worth having some insight and some knowledge too, so that you can support your children as and when they need it. Thank you for attending. I hope you've enjoyed the session. It's been useful to you. There's my email address and the link should you want any further information about the courses. Have a super week. Thank you.